Hello, Abnormal Family. Thank you for tuning in. And I've got another good one for you. First, I would like to say we have a lot of new things coming to the channel, and I believe you all are going to really enjoy them. Also, if you would like to support Hunter Coming Home, the links are in the descriptions. And thank you all, and God bless you for everything you are doing. It means the most to us. Let's get into this story. Excuse me. For some context, I'm an 18-year-old girl from Kiruna, Sweden. It's about as far north as you can get, and I've lived here since I was 6 years old. My family is originally from Finland, but we moved to my granddad's house here and he has passed away. Even if I haven't lived here my whole life, I know our land like the back of my hand. And there's a lot of it. We inherited miles of forest, and my brother and I have turned basically every rock we could find. My dad's an experienced hunter, and he lives in a small cabin in the woods during hunting season, and we rarely see him until it's over. Well, when I was around 14, I was finally allowed to come with him. It took a lot of convincing, since he sees his hunting as a relaxing convenience, since he sees his work is very hard. But I had gotten pretty good at it and hunting, so I was allowed to come. Please excuse my language, as I'm not real well in English. It was autumn, so it wasn't that cold, but I could remember we spent the nights huddled together in front of the open fire. We had a really nice time for about a week, fishing and tracking animals in the forest. We had brought along our 1-year-old Norwegian elk hound named Titty, pronounced TT. It was her first hunting trip, so we were both excited to see how she'd do. One misty morning, when we let her go, she took off like a rocket, tracking something around the house a few times before bolting into the forest. We followed her for a few hours and eventually ended up in a really nice clearing, where we sat down to drink some hot chocolate. As we were chatting about nothing, we heard the bark, which meant she'd found something. So my dad told me to pack up as he ran ahead. I wasn't worried, as I saw him disappear into the tree line. I thought I knew the forest better than anyone after all. I was walking toward the forest, pulling at some loose strings from my sleeves as a shot rang out, which made me jump. Luckily, my dad had reminded me to wear my sound mufflers. I got excited and almost ran towards the sound, but remembered that my dad had told me to stay away if he started shooting. I stayed in my place for a while until another shot rang out, and then another. A total of 5 shots were fired until TT stopped barking and let out a loud scream. It was nothing like I'd heard before. I'd stepped on her tail before and heard her whimper, but the sound she let out sounded like a strangled cry from a human. I began to wail immediately and screamed for my dad. I could hear the sounds of footsteps approaching, and my dad came running through the forest carrying Titi in his arms. He had covered her in his jacket, which was covered in blood. I barely remember what happened after because I was crying so hard, but we ended up in Dad's truck and we drove off to the vet. They took her in as my dad drove me home, hugging me as I continued to cry the entire day. Titi didn't get to come home until a few days later, and when she did, she had bandages all over her face. She was really sad and whimpered if anyone got near her snout. I didn't care, though. I was just happy to have our dog home. My dad told me she'd been kicked by a moose and that her nose was basically crushed. It was bent 90 degrees to her right. She had lost most of her teeth. Poor girl. I still feel bad thinking about Dad having to feed her through the tube as she healed up. But she eventually healed up, and life went on as normal. She recovered nicely, and I was allowed to come along on more trips to the forest. But now, starting about a month ago, strange things started happening, and it's scaring my whole family. On our last trip, we found tracks that looked like they came from a giant moose. We are used to moose walking around our property, and we know how massive they can be, but these tracks were so big that even my dad didn't follow them. During the night, we'd hear moose calls really close to our house, and would find the tracks closer and closer to our house. One day my brother had been playing outside with his friends when they suddenly came in screaming. Outside, just by the edge of the forest, stood a massive moose. Dad grabbed for his rifle and pointed it at the moose, who just stood there, staring at us without even flinching. TT ran around and it barked, but it didn't move. It only moved when Dad fired, and it did slowly, and then it turned back into the forest. TT ran after it, which was obviously dangerous as the moose didn't seem to have even a little bit of fear for her. We tried to call her back, but she didn't listen and ran into the woods. We didn't find her for 2 days, even when we spent both days searching like crazy. She eventually came back home, but honestly, I'm not sure it's the same dog that ran off. Not only does she seem skinnier after just a few days, but her personality's different. She usually cuddles and is obedient, but lately she keeps to herself and doesn't even sleep in my bed anymore, which she used to do every night. She just wanders around all night and sniffs around our bedroom doors. Sometimes we hear her growl and gargle like she's puking, but when we check on her, she's fine. She doesn't listen to our commands even when we bribe her with a ham, which is her favorite. My parents told me she's probably just exhausted from being lost and that we should give her time. Well, I did. We all did. She kept acting weirder and weirder. She stopped eating her food and limped, but we couldn't see anything at the vet's. Then her fur began falling out as she grew scabs all over her body. She'd snarl whenever anyone tried to touch her, and we scared of even going close to her as she snapped at us. A few days ago, after having a few drinks with some friends, I came home and fell asleep and had the most horrifying dream. I dreamed that I was in our forest trying to find my way back home. But I just got more and more lost. I knew my way home, but it was like the ground kept changing. I couldn't hear the sound of the large hooves stomping around me. As I began to panic, I heard TT bark in the distance and then heard her scream, like the day she was kicked in the face. Then I suddenly found myself in my parents' bedroom, standing at the doorway as they slept in their bed. TT crawled out from under the bed. From her legs were hairy human arms, with long fingers scratching at the floor as she emerged. She looked horrifying, her teeth digging into her lower jaw, and her eyes were glowing bright red. I wanted something to scream, but I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything but watch as she crawled onto their bed. Then she stood up on her hind legs, which grew in length. Then she was an old man, with legs which grew. She had gray skin, but the eyes were still glowing red. He or she turned to me and opened their mouth, which was just a large black hole with long sharp teeth. It sounded like a dog growling, but like it was off key. I don't know how to describe it. It was like some kind of auto-tune or really, really off key. I woke up screaming, my sheets drenched in sweat. The worst part, TT was standing in the doorway. She was just watching me, sniffing in the air as I screamed for my mom. I cried in her arms for an hour before she managed to calm me down. She told me that it was just weird, that I just had a drunk dream, which actually calmed me down a lot. TT seemed to feel much better as she laid down on my feet, as she hadn't done in days. Her body was warm and I could feel her heart beating against my feet, and I suddenly remembered the love that I had felt for her. She keeps getting better and then worse, and then I'm having nightmares every night. In the most recent one, I could see her body leaving the ground as she twisted, snout bled into her throat, choking her. I wake up crying almost every day, and every day TT is standing in my doorway. The last time that I had this horrible dream, I woke up and saw my dog standing in my doorway on her hind legs, just staring at me with her arms like a kangaroo's. She turned and walked away on 2 legs. I don't know if I should tell my family, if they'll think I'm crazy or if they'll think it was just another dream. But now when I wake up every morning, there she is, standing at my doorway on 2 legs, and will turn and walk away as if she's making sure that I'm not telling anybody or she's watching me. What do you guys think I should do? I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I think it's a pretty wild story. I had a dog, in some of mine that acted really strange. So what do you all think about this one? I look forward to seeing it in the comments. Don't forget, like, subscribe, Liking is huge. If you haven't subscribed, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel. We have a lot more good stuff coming, boots on the ground, and a lot of lives with some pretty special guests coming that we're working on. And don't forget, if you would like to support Hunter Coming Home, the links are in the description. God bless you all, and keep your head on a swivel, and don't become something's dinner.